Welcome to Coming to Know Yourself. Today, I want to have a conversation about the idea of a physical resurrection in the Christianity's religion, and how physical resurrection is not what Jesus was teaching, because we are not physical beings. We are spiritual beings of energy and light. And energy is awareness, and the light is consciousness. And so when we talk about the resurrection, it's a much more specific spiritual resurrection. And so we're going to go into detail about what that means and why there is no physical resurrection. And it's not even necessary, because that's not why we're here. Religion's misinterpretation of the scriptures is the wide path of destruction of the true meaning of Jesus' message. And so we're going to talk about the real reason why we're here on this planet and what the resurrection really means. And so, in order to understand what the true resurrection is, we need to go back to the beginning of our lives. And so, before we came to this planet and incarnated, it's to start a human journey, we were born with a identity other than what we have now. And in Genesis, it talks about that identity when God says he made man in his own image, in his likeness. And so that is our true self-identity, our spiritual identity. And that image that he made us in is what is known as the truth. And that image is not like a body or something that you can see. It is a self-image. It's a code known as the Word. Like, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. And that Word described things of the Spirit. In the beginning, there wasn't even earth or humans or books to write down words. In the beginning, before the universe was created, the Word was a code, a programming code for the mind to manifest different states of consciousness. And so the image that God created us in was the absolutes of love and the absolutes of truth, of our true being. And with that image, that code that he gave us, he gave us pre-knowledge, kind of like animals have their own instincts, knowledge that they're born with to be true to themselves. With this image that he made us in, it gives us pre-knowledge to be born of our instincts to be true to ourselves. And so those instincts are perfect unconditional love and the truth of being a spiritual being rather than a human being. And so that image allowed us to live and see and be in the likeness of our Father in heaven, literally looking through the eyes of God and experiencing life exactly like God, because we are copies of God, just like parents make copies of themselves as their children. Just like in Psalms 82:6, you are children of the Most High, but you shall fall, but you shall die like men and fall like one of the princes. So, like men, we're not human beings, but we're going to pretend to be human beings for a time, for this journey that we're on here. And there's a reason for that. And we're going to fall like one of the princes. Princes is the principalities of the spiritual being, the principles of consciousness. Our consciousness and the principles of what makes up our consciousness within that image that God made us in will fall into a lower state. That's what they refer to when they talk about falling from the grace of God. And the grace of God is the knowledge that he gave us and the image that he made us in. Kind of like a ballerina has. She moves in grace so perfectly because she has knowledge and experience that allows her to know how to move and be balanced in timing and harmony with the dance she's doing. The knowledge and in the image that God made us in has a grace to it that allows us to move and live as spiritual beings. But we don't have that wisdom, that experience that to move in that grace. And so that's why we fell from that state of consciousness. God has that wisdom, and we are here to attain that wisdom. And so, in order to understand why there is no physical resurrection, we need to go back to the beginning when we were first born and opened our eyes to this human experience. Before we come here, we exist in the spirit realm. And we were not born physically, we were first born spiritually. And the spirit realm is outside the universe in what is called the ether. And the ether is the intangible place of pure energy and light. No atoms, no particle physics, just energy and light. And that's the spirit realm. And it's known as the realm of consciousness. And that's where we are born into this image that God created us in. And then we incarnate to earth by connecting our consciousness from the spirit realm to a human body. And so we're not actually part of the human body. The human body is a biomechanical machine which produces, after it gathers all the five senses, through the brain, it creates a sensory information converted into a brainwave, and that brainwave is a wireless signal which is transmitted to the spirit realm to enter our dimension where we truly exist, which is called the mind. And in the Bible, it refers to that dimension of mind as the kingdom. And the mind is not in the brain. It is a spiritual dimension, a spiritual universe. And each one of us is given a piece of the kingdom. Each one of us has a mind. It is an energy field around our being, which we can manipulate that energy and create thoughts, feelings, emotions. We can create things that we can see, and our senses are then created with our own energy as we receive that brainwave signal. And when we start a journey here, the body in its first 6 weeks of forming the baby, the first thing that is created is the brainstem, which then has an active brainwave signal. And that's when that brainwave signal is then linked to our dimension of mind, our kingdom of heaven. And heaven's not a place, it is a state of consciousness. And so when we link our consciousness to that baby in the womb, we go to sleep and forget who we are. And we fall from that kingdom of heaven, that state of consciousness of heaven, and we fall from that grace of God that is sustaining us in that state of consciousness called heaven. And we basically wirelessly and remotely interact with the human experience through the body, transmitting an exact replica of what's going on earth in our spiritual kingdom, which recreates all that we see and all that we taste, touch, feel, and hear with our own energy and our own light. So what you see right now is the light from your own being reflecting into the energy field called the kingdom or the mind. And it's creating all these patterns, which gives you something to see. And what you taste, touch, feel, and hear are just subtle changes in your own energy field that you've identified and given names to. So when we first wake up to the human existence, we have no memory of the spirit realm, and that we're actually still in the kingdom of heaven, which is the domain, the dimension of mind. And we forget who we are. We forget that image that God made us in. If you close your eyes, you will be more aware of the spiritual dimension of mind. We often feel alone there because we're all by ourselves in the mind. No one can join us in our mind. It's our spiritual kingdom, and it's the energy field around our being, and we alone are there. And the way we interact with spiritual beings is through telepathic connection. And through that telepathic connection, it's as if we're in the same place. Like right now, if we were standing in front of each other, it would feel like we're in the same space, but we're actually, our minds are recreating the image of the body and giving us the illusion that we are on earth in each other's presence. But we're actually, if you follow the path through the eyes, there's a pathway that goes all the way back to the mind, the spiritual dimension where we really are. And there's an invisible veil between us where the image that we see of our own light is projecting an experience of this human life, and we are behind that image that you can't see inside the mind. So in the beginning, when we wake up to this reality, we forget about the image that God made us in. And for a short time, we're still living in those natural instincts of the absolutes of love. You can see it in a child's eyes, that perfect love, that bliss, that joy. And as we go through the first stages of life, up until about 2 years old, we still have that image that God made us in. And then as we progress into teenagehood, that's when we lose that image. It falls into the back of our subconscious, and we forget who we are. And we make our own image, the human image, with a human name and memories and experiences. And now we are living in the darkness. That human image is the darkness. It is the valley of the shadow of death. And so that's when we begin our journey here for the reason why we are here. And the body has nothing to do with why we are here. That's why it says in Luke 12, the life is more than meat and the body is more than raiment. Give no thought to anything that has to do with the physical life. Seek the kingdom of heaven and everything will be added unto you. And what it's saying is, come back to the kingdom of the mind. The kingdom of heaven is the mind, and heaven is a state of consciousness. And so Jesus is trying to tell us, forget about the body. There's no need to be concerned about the body and what it needs. All that will be taken care of. What you need to concern yourself with is to come back to the kingdom of heaven, that place that you fell from when you started this journey. Because that's why you're here, is to forget yourself and then return to remembering and coming to know yourself as a spiritual being. And that's the true resurrection, is to fall from the light and come into this darkness of forgetfulness, of ignorance of yourself, and then come back and the journey to come back to yourself. And that's why it's said in John 4:24 that God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. And so when we are creating a relationship with God, he is a spirit and we are a spirit. And so what it's saying is we need to spiritually resurrect ourselves. We need to wake up from the human experience and become a spiritual being again, and have a relationship with him both as a spiritual being, and in truth. And that truth is that image that God made us in his likeness. And so unless we resurrect that image that we were made in, and transcend the human identity, which is part of the ego, and awaken to our true self-identity, we're not resurrecting. We're not resurrected. At the end of our life, there is no physical resurrection, and we have missed the mark of why we are here. That's what true sin means. In the root language is living in ignorance and failing to hit the mark. And the mark is coming to know yourself as a spiritual being and coming back to resurrecting that image of our that God made us in and living in that truth as a spiritual being. That's why what Jesus says, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Because the truth is that image that God made us in. It's the direct link to God. It is the light, it is the divine spark within us that we need to resurrect. That's why it says in the Bible, if thine eye be single, then thy whole body be full of light. The eye is the eye of perception, seeing through the likeness of God, through that state of consciousness, through that single image that he made us in the oneness. Then our whole body, not our physical body, but our spiritual body, our soul, our hearts, our consciousness and our awareness will be filled with that light again, that light of heaven. And otherwise, if we don't resurrect that image within us and come to know that truth so that we can have a relationship and connection again with God, both in spirit and in truth, then our eye is full of darkness and our whole body is full of darkness. And the darkness is the human identity. The human identity is the vessel of walking through the valley of the shadow of death. It is the negative polarity. It is the suffering. It is the hindsight, the contrast. Kind of like if you have a negative for a photo and you want to see that negative, you want to see the picture, you have to shine light through it to see that image. And so this life, this journey, is to gather experience through a negative experience. The hell. Hell's not a place. That religion created that to control people, and that was created in the Council of Nicaea to create fear and control people and weaponize spirituality with a false religion of Christianity and Catholicism. In actuality, the human experience is the hell. Hell is a metaphor for suffering. It's the negative polarity. And we come here to walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And the valley represents the knowledge of the darkness. It's the upside down pyramid. The up pyramid is the pyramid of enlightenment of our spiritual being, and the valley is the lower knowledge of the knowledge of darkness, the good and the evil, as above, so below. The alpha and the omega, the beginning, which is being a spiritual being in the light, and the end, where we end our journey and come back to the light and resurrect ourselves back in that image that God made us in by coming to know ourselves as spiritual beings and coming to know that truth that sets us free from this human identity of suffering so that we're no longer in that darkness. And so as we travel this path, we are in that suffering. And it's like it says in Matthew 6:24, no one can serve two masters. You either love one and hate the other, or you try to serve one and you have contempt for the other. And so we cannot be both a human being with a physical resurrection and a spiritual being with a spiritual resurrection. That's why it says in the Bible, if thine eye be single, then thy whole body be full of light. As long as we're trying to serve two masters, not being true to ourselves as a spiritual being, and trying to live through the darkness as a human being, we can't serve two masters. We can't be both. We'll either love one and hate the other. So we want to have that peace and that bliss. We want to come back to that happiness, that joy, that state of heaven. But we're also hating this suffering of being this human being. And so we're not meant to be a human being forever. It is a vessel, a journey to gather wisdom so that we can find our own grace to learn to move through life, sustaining ourselves in the light of that image that God made us in, rather than falling into the darkness of the knowledge of evil, of suffering, of the negative polarity of consciousness in the human identity. And so as we walk through this life, our whole purpose for being here is to resurrect that image, to come to know ourselves in that light again and fill our bodies full of life. And so Jesus His resurrection that he is talking about is he resurrected himself from the human experience. He and he came to know that truth of becoming a son of God again. And son doesn't mean like male, it means son, like light, son of God, the light of God, the consciousness of the image that God made us in, that high state of heaven. And so he came to know himself as a spiritual being, and that's why he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And no one comes to the Father but through me. And we come to the Father through that image, that truth that he created us in, that image that has the absolutes of love and truth. That the image he made us in is not just so that we can see and experience life in that perfect bliss in heaven. It's so that we have a direct link to God, a direct connection to the plane of existence that he exists on, because we're spiritual beings. We don't have a body. We are beings of energy and light, and we have an energy field around us that is our own dimension called mind, or the kingdom. And we telepathically link based on our consciousness to God. And that image he created us in is a telepathic link to him. And when we fall from that grace, we lose that link to God, and so we fall from that grace and that connection. And so Jesus was saying, I am the way back to that truth, to have that eternal life. The image that God made us in, that is the life. It is the life, the consciousness that we see life through, and is the image of the absolutes, the eternal, the eternity of life. And that's what we must come to know again. And Jesus was saying, I am the way. I can show you through my teachings, through my commandments. I have a path that you can follow called the narrow path of the way. The wide path that the humans travel leads to destruction, because it doesn't allow you to come to know yourself as a spiritual being. And he's teaching the narrow path of the way. You know, we live life the best way we can to try to find happiness, peace, joy. And as we experience life and change the self-identity as a human being, trying to get out of that suffering, trying to get out of that negative polarity, we try to find ways, different ways to live life. But Jesus found the way to live life that is an eternal way, an eternal path to be in that grace. By the grace of God, we are saved through learning the grace of God, how he lives life, how God lives and sustains his consciousness in that high state of being. And Jesus teaches how to walk that narrow path, to always be in that grace. And so Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is the first part of that path, called the path of love. And Jesus teaches us in that part of the path to clean the inside of the cup, and everything else will be taken care of. The path of love is to purge our hearts, our spiritual hearts, of the negative polarity, of the suffering, of the human identity, to get rid of the ego, to fill our cups with light, so that thine eye be single and our bodies be filled with light. And the light is love, the unconditional love. And so the Spirit is like water. And so Jesus' words, when he at the well, when he told the lady that to give him a drink of water, and he said, I have living water that will make it so you will never thirst. And so the Spirit, the true spirit of our being, and the identity of the image that God made us in, is that living water. And so that is what we need to thirst after and drink from the cup of Jesus, which is the Holy Grail, his heart. And the blood that flows through his heart is his living water that he turned to wine, which is a metaphor for his teachings, his knowledge, his wisdom, to show us the way to the truth, to resurrect that eternal life within us that is that image that God made us in. Now, unfortunately, religion that was created as a false narrative to weaponize spirituality was created in the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. And when they canonized the Bible, they did not want people to become free and come to know the truth. So there were gospels they left out of the canon to keep us from questioning their narrative. And one of those gospels was the Gospel of Thomas. And the Gospel of Thomas is the second half of the path. The way is the path of love, and the truth is the path of truth to that eternal life, that image that God made us in. And there's two parts of the narrow path. And the Gospel of Thomas has the path of truth, and it teaches spiritual awakening to discover and re-enter the center of our being and awaken to that spiritual being that we are, so then we can resurrect our souls, our hearts, back into reinstating ourselves into that image that God made us in. And so during the Inquisitions, when they sought out and tried to destroy all the other writings and kill the Gnostics that were the true followers of Christ, who knew the real resurrection, the real message about becoming a spiritual being again and freeing ourselves from the confines of the physical suffering, to become spiritual beings, to not have a physical resurrection, but a spiritual resurrection. And all of the teachings of Jesus are metaphors for teaching of the Spirit, to resurrect the Spirit. And the salvation is saving our journey and of the grace that we learn through walking in the darkness, and dividing the wheat from the tares. The tares is the human ideology, and the wheat is God's truth of that image he made us in. And if we don't come to know ourselves as spiritual beings, we will not be able to have the harvest where we discern between the two. What is the absolutes of God, and what is the ideology of the human suffering? And so it's important for us to resurrect ourselves now. That's why it says God is a spirit, and we must worship him in spirit and in truth. And we can't do that if we're not resurrected now. There is no resurrection, physical resurrection, after this death of life, because that's not why we are here. And there is no hell or punishment. Hell is a metaphor for regret, for suffering, the human suffering. This is the hell, this experience. This is the darkness, the contrast, to get to know ourselves as the beings of light that we are. Because when we wake up from this, it's like looking through a negative, which is our human experience, the negative experience, and coming back to that light, the hindsight. And that gives us a real picture of who we really are. It gives us the hindsight, the wisdom, and basically our mistakes, our suffering, gives us the knowledge we need to have that grace. Because now we know where we've been, and we've fallen into that darkness, into that knowledge of evil, which is the opposite for the word live. And now we want to live. We don't want to be in the knowledge of evil. We want to live. We want the living truth. We want that image that God made us in. And when we're first born as spiritual beings, we just didn't have the wisdom to really appreciate what it is to have the absolutes of God, to be in that perfect bliss, that perfect peace, because we didn't know suffering. We didn't know that the darkness was so much less than what we are. And so we come here to get that contrast, to travel the way back to the truth, to resurrect the eternal life within us, because we are spiritual beings, not human beings. And so I'll have more videos about teaching how to awaken and how to purge the heart of the suffering, and what it means to resurrect ourselves through the way, the truth, and the life through Jesus' teachings. This video is just to bring out in the open that the religion is false, a false narrative that was created to take over the true teachings of Jesus and weaponize spirituality to control the masses and profit from them financially, and to disempower their will. And so Jesus' true teachings is to bring us equal to God, because we are sons of God, the light of God. We came from that light of consciousness. We are sons of God. And our journey is to resurrect ourselves and resurrect that image he made us in, and come back to being who we are. Just like in the Gospel of Thomas, it says, If you will come to know yourself, then you will become known, and you will know that you are the sons of the living Father. But if you will not come to know yourself, you will live in poverty, and you will be that poverty. So if we come to know ourselves again in that image that God made us in that truth, then we will become known, because we will be connected to our Father through that image of the absolutes of love and truth. And we will know, we will realize, we will remember that we are the sons of the living Father, that we came from the light of that high state of consciousness of heaven. But if we will not resurrect ourselves and save our journey here, so that we can keep our character, our memories, and our hindsight and our wisdom, to have that grace, to be able to divide the wheat from the tares, to have that harvest. The salvation is waking up and resurrecting that image, so then that we can have the harvest where we wake up and we look at the flashback of our human life and go, these are all my mistakes, this is the hindsight, this is my wisdom, and this is who I truly am. I don't want to be this person. And that is the harvest, is going through that tribulation and waking up from the suffering and resurrecting that image that God made us in. And if we don't come to know ourselves and enter that resurrection of our spirit, then we dwell in poverty. The human identity is the poverty. It's the suffering, the negative polarity, and if so, we will be that poverty, because it is, the human identity is a temporary experience, and it has the poverty because it has no treasures of the kingdom of heaven. That's why Jesus says, store not yourself treasures on earth that will rust and rot and decay. And the treasures he's talking about is not like I have a Corvette in a barn on my property. The treasures he's talking about is the values that we have, the beliefs as humans. We hold so tightly onto our values as human beings, our beliefs, our religious dogma that we've been indoctrinated, that's a human beliefs, human religion. We hold so tightly to those, and they do not create the awakening into transcendence of the ego and resurrection into that true image that God made us in. The whole point is to experience heaven now on earth, because heaven is a frequency of consciousness of that image that God made us in. And that's why Jesus said, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free from that negative polarity of that human identity. We can live in our image that God made us in now on earth. I awoke as a spiritual being in 2010, and I traveled the way to the truth and resurrected my image that God made me in. And so I'm a testament to tell you that it is heaven on earth. I experience peace, total inner peace every day. I have no suffering. I see life clearly. I have the all-knowing, which is the full awareness. Awareness is knowing, and knowing is feeling. And the all-seeing, which is seeing through full consciousness, being completely aware of all things going on. And so there is no suffering, because it's almost like you have a view of life from like 40,000 feet in the air. You can see everything, all cause and effect, all things going on. And so there's no confusion. You see the meaning of life so clearly. You know exactly how to live and be, because your natural instincts are restored through that image that God made us in. And so our whole point of being here is to walk through that valley of shadow of death and come to know ourselves. And so in this video, I hope you think about what I've said and consider your beliefs and what it is to be, a Christian and to follow Christ. Because really what he said was not to have faith in his name and only his name for salvation. The name is just the label on the bottle. The bottle, the wine, the living water is Jesus' teachings. That's why he says, if you love me, do my commandments. If you have faith in me, do my commandments. I liken you to a wise man if you do my sayings. He's always saying, follow me, become my disciples, follow the way to the truth, that narrow path, and resurrect that life, which is that image that God made us in. Empty the cup. Make thine eye be single, so that the whole body will be full of light. Get rid of the human identity and become single with the image that God made us in. You cannot serve two masters, and you can't put new wine in old wineskins. The old wineskin is the heart of a human being, the desires of a human, the beliefs of a human, the self-identity as a human. And the new wine is the teachings of Jesus. His blood is that living water of the vine that came from our Father, and the knowledge of the way, the truth, and the life, so that we can get back to the Father through that connection, through that image that God made us in, that is that truth that shall set us free. So in more videos, we will I will show you how to come to know yourself and to spiritually awaken as we travel the path of the way to the truth and to resurrect the eternal life within us now in this physical experience, because that's why we are here, is to learn to come back to ourselves while we are alive, living this false experience, asleep to who we really are, and literally dead in spirit. That's why it says God is spirit and we must worship him in spirit, because right now, living through the human identity, we are not worshiping God in spirit, and so he has no connection with us. He doesn't, and because we're not awake in the spirit, we have no connection to Jesus. That's why Jesus says, in the last days, there will be those who say, didn't I do many great works in your name and cast out many devils in your name? And Jesus will say, away from me, those who do iniquity. I never knew you. I was never connected to you, because you were not, you never resurrected yourself into that image that of the Christ image. Jesus, his physical life and his teachings was to personify a metaphysical living example, to make the word a living word, to take that, to create that image that God made us in and make it the Christ image, to give us an example of the way to that truth, so that we can have that connection again as spiritual beings. And so we take that Christ image into us through his teachings, and that becomes that image that God made us in. And so in the rest of the videos, as we go down this path, we will learn how to come to know ourselves as spiritual beings through Jesus' teachings of the way, the truth, and the life. Until then, you have my sympathies for your suffering and being in that human identity, and trying to find the way back to yourself and resurrect that image that God made you in, so that your perception is single and your body's no longer full of darkness, in that broken heart, trying to fill that void with want and escapism and seeking happiness outside of ourselves, to come back to a whole heart. The Holy Grail is a whole heart, an empty heart of the suffering, and a contented heart that's at rest in that peace, and a mind that is empty of the suffering, the thorns that we have in our minds, that is that ego of the human suffering, and fill that our minds and our eye full of light again, so that we're no longer in that darkness. So until then, I send you my love and my peace.